Hello and welcome to Modern Mondays here at Guardian Games in Portland, Oregon. We're here for round number 1 of 4 of some analog modern Magic the Gathering. I'm Travis Cooper, hanging out with
Ian, the producer.
Ed, and we're from Portland Paper. We do streaming here every Monday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we've got an interesting matchup here. What are we looking at, Ian?
We are looking at Greg Hagg playing some humans and Zeke Rosenberg on some Izzet Storm.
All right, I heard that Zeke was maybe playing some I will paraphrase Zeke where he said, I'm playing Janky Storm tonight, and I think there's some Aria Flames involved in this, and I'm curious what else is going to be around.
Yeah, interesting that he called it Janky Storm as, to be honest, I think Aria Flame is not even jank at this point. It's been taking over Izzet Phoenix lists, and I'm not at all surprised to see it in Storm as a card that completely avoids the graveyard.
So both players have their 1-drop here. Greg starting off with probably the best 1-drop in the deck with Aether Vial, and Zeke with the Serum Vision.
Travis, while we got a second, let's actually take a look at Aria Flame. So Travis, what makes Aria Flame good in Storm?
Put your opponent's gain 10 life, that seems really awful, right?
Well, unless you're playing Death Shadow.
Whoa, next
Oh,
level.
tech.
Ooh, Meddling Mage. What are we naming here? Didn't quite hear it, but maybe Greg's writing it down. Yep, neglecting to show us. Meddling Mage, one of the cards when humans started to become a tier deck that kind of pushed Storm out because there's very few ways to interact with the Meddling Mage in the main deck of Storm.
Let's see if we can spy that.
Bolt.
Looks like Bolt. So Greg with a conservative name here. He has not seen a lot of what Zeke is up to, so very defensible name early on.
Yeah, usually if you see Spirebuff Canal into some Serum Vision and plus a Thought Scour, you're thinking, oh, this might be Izzet Phoenix I'm playing against.
It is one nice thing about playing Storm currently. Ooh, Zeke with some Echo of Eons in the Storm deck as well. Let's actually let's take a look at Echo of Eons, Travis.
All right, we're getting a Champion of the Parish out there off of an Aether Vial from Greg. Seems like Zeke was kind of digging for another land drop there. Echo of Eons has made more of a splash, I would say, in Legacy with the Lion's Eye Diamond combo, but interesting to see it here in Modern.
Yeah, the card has been a bit slow on the uptick. Kind of heralded as possibly busted when it came out. We have not actually seen this card make a lot of waves in Modern, and really in Legacy, it turns out Time Spiral is not as good as people maybe once imagined. So Zeke drops an Aria Flame, which puts Greg up to 30. So Greg's feeling comfortable for now. That said, Aria Flame in both Izzet Phoenix and Storm takes off in a hurry.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what we should have Zeke at, but Zeke isn't sitting at 20, has taken some damage off these creatures. We'll update that in a minute. Recycling a Horizon Canopy here for Greg. And attacking and getting a trigger off of that Anafinza. And Zeke dropping down to 7 there.
So Zeke has to go off next turn.
Storm count. Yeah, it doesn't have to be on the same turn. Okay. Pass.
All right, there's the 4th land in Zeke's hand. How many spells are we going to get to?
So Greg has had the clock with humans. I think the meddling mage on Bolt is not gonna do a ton this game.
Let's see what we can do.
So I think it's very realistic that Zeke could actually combo off and win this turn.
Play a pyretic ritual.
And we get a Pyretic Ritual for a storm count of 1.
Trigger Aria.
Nice, Zeke with some tokens. Something we love here at Portland Paper, players that bring their own tokens.
I have a soft spot for the Pokemon tokens.
Yeah, me too.
Play a Desperate Ritual. Go
Yep.
for 4.
Gonna get another ritual here.
Storm count is 2.
And I'll play a Manamorphose. Make it 2 blue. 3. Okay. 23.
Aria Flame kicking in here.
Oh, it seemed like we had another Manamorphose picked up off that, which is a pretty great draw.
I'm gonna play a Manamorphose. And
Yeah, how do you like free 4 damage, Travis?
14.
Well, we're getting there. We still have a lot of mana floating.
Should be up to 4 Storm. I guess the Aria Flame's tracking Storm for us at this point.
I'm gonna cast a Faithless Looting. 5 you.
All right, see that ubiquitous modern card in Faithless Looting. We're gonna draw 2. 2 Simian Spirit Guides picked up there.
It's not bad. Zeke still has that Echo of Aeon sitting in his graveyard, so if he's able to hold up 2 mana to re-up on rituals,
Exile Simian Spirit Guide.
he's in a good spot.
Exile Simian Spirit Guide.
Here we
And
go.
Flashback Echo of It. Each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library.
Flashing back Echo of Aeons. Let's take a look again.
It looks
This
like
is essentially flashback time spiral.
Zeke is also playing Narset for the combo with Echo of Aeons, where I get to draw all the cards and you don't get to draw any,
So what's that? Oh,
except for
we're
1.
hand and graveyard, shuffle, and then we're wheeling. Yep.
Greg is going through the motions here. This is looking very, very good for Zeke.
Didn't think this was gonna pan out like this.
I got a really good feeling that
It's kind of looking good. Double Simian.
Even
Spirit
Zeke's
Guide
a
off
little
the table.
surprised at the outcome here.
I
Said
mean, if
he-
you're gonna flashback Echo of Aeons, Simian Spirit Guide's a pretty good pickup.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, you're not going to draw him again, but you're not super upset about that. All your rituals back in your deck. Certainly not as good with Past in Flames this version. If you're going to shuffle everything from your graveyard back in, but
Ritual Manamorphose.
that'll do it. Zeke tosses down a ritual Manamorphose that Aria of Flame is just going to deal the damage needed to take Greg out. What a demonstration.
Okay. In response to you activating Vial, I'll cast it.
All right, Greg was gonna activate an Aether Vial there, and Zeke was like, you know what? In response to that, I'm gonna cast Manamorphose and do some more stuff.
I will
And-
kill you. In response, I will also kill you more.
Oh, it's kind of fun to see some new cards getting played that aren't called Hogak or Altar of Dementia.
Yeah. It's almost like this set had things for other decks.
So it seems like Zeke's version of Storm is a bit more all in when you're running Simian Spirit Guides, but Narset also enables you to find some of those combo pieces, so perhaps it is a little bit slower, but could be like more consistent maybe. I'm unsure what the advantages are. It's interesting at this, just seeing this one game. I haven't seen this deck play out before. What do you think, Ian?
Well, I think first off, Zeke is not very reliant on the graveyard in this matchup, which is extremely helpful in that with the Gak Menace running around, there's just a lot of graveyard hate. So the fact that Zeke is able to kind of execute his game plan minus the graveyard is pretty solid. Also, moving to sideboard, Zeke has chosen to sideboard in 3 Blood Moons and I believe 3 Echoing Truths. So a pretty straightforward sideboard plan. Thoughts on turn 1 Blood Moon in this matchup, Travis? As that's a possibility for Zeke.
Well, Zeke's going to be on the draw, so Blood Moon's really good when humans doesn't have Aether Vial, but sometimes you can choose them out by coupling an Echoing Truth and a Blood Moon, just slowing humans down enough to then execute your storm count. But yeah, a fine sideboard. Interested what Zeke is siding out for those cards.
Were you running
And yeah, it seems like Zeke's deck with
Phoenix for a while?
the Aria of Flame
Did you play
isn't
Aria?
as dependent on the graveyard
Yeah, I
as
only
Storm
played
decks
it
have
for
been
the week
in the
we played in
past.
Seattle.
Um, with Past and
But
Flames, except you do sort of lean on the flashback
when, especially just
for
like
your
in
Time Warp
different
effect
games.
there, or for your
So like Pyromancer's Ascension can be
Good
kind of
point.
tricky to
Yep.
turn on sometimes.
I do think
And
if Greg has access to it, I would expect to see him bring in Sin Collector in this matchup.
you have a high life total and certain
Exiling cards from
things,
Storm is
he's
great.
trying to like double bolt them out of the game by
Um,
putting together a bunch of
maybe Deputy Detention. There's usually split between main and sideboard in humans, and I could see that being a card that gets brought in just for Arya.
yeah, that's a really nice catch-all that has kind of been added to humans, even though it itself is not a human.
It's true. It seems like usually it's a split of some amount in main and side, but a 4 of in the 75. I like that. Reflector Mage, pretty bad in the matchup. That's an easy one to side out for humans.
Can we even call it humans now that they play like close to 8 cards that aren't even humans between Phantasmal Image and
Well,
Deputy?
Phantasmal Image is a human. But
Gross.
it is interesting to see spirits and humans kind of merging into, spirits will play some humans and humans will play some spirits. I've seen some humans list with Spell Quellers and playing in Collected Company mana base. It's interesting to see a little bit of tweaking of Tier 1 archetypes here.
Yeah, the
And-
new Horizon lands have made a bit of a splash. You're seeing some Jeskai humans lists as well.
Yeah, I saw some interesting humans lists that played Lightning Helix's removal and dropped the green.
19 noble.
Greg's dropping down to 19 and playing one of the 2 nobles that are in the opening hand there.
and pass.
And Zeke with my favorite mountain artwork there. Out of all the beta mountains, I like that one the best. And it also happens to be the one that they printed in Arabian Nights, which is my favorite mountain.
18
Mm-hmm.
noble.
Is this noble going to get frisky, or are we going to get a 2-drop here?
And it looks like Greg has some Grand Prix Islands. Also good choice.
All right, nobles are growing.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mopey Thalia. Growing the nobles is okay, but certainly not the most explosive start. So Greg has managed to grow a marginal board by turn 2, but has not played any disruption. And that is not a recipe for success against this Storm list so far.
It's kind of like build your own champion of the parishes here with the noble hierarchs plus Thalia. And I think there is a phantasmal image in Greg's hand. So if Greg wants to go in on the copy Thalia's lieutenant beatdown plan, that's an option.
Right, and Zeke also appears to be stuck on only 2 mountains, no islands, so he's sitting on a bunch of cantrips and has no ability to cast them.
Seems like a Manamorphose is going to be essential to opening up this hand. Or at least some kind of blue-red fast land.
There we go. There's some disruptions.
Anger.
Meddling Mage is going to name Anger of the Gods.
Interesting. So, Travis, what do you think about kind of a defensive name on Meddling Mage?
Well, I thought it was funny at first because Greg said name Anger, which Anger is actually a card that's a creature. When it's in your graveyard, all your creatures have haste, which if you're at a Comp Ariel event would be very humorous. But I think Zeke it's like Anger of the Gods and accepted that as a name. But
And Greg names Bolt with the Phantasmal Image copying Meddling Mage. This is really surprising to me. He's protecting his board, but not really interacting with what Zeke is trying to do.
Shock myself.
all right, we're getting a thing in the ice. So it seems like Zeke is on an alternative win condition for this post-board game.
Resetting this board would be great. Greg is only sitting on 2 lands. He's been leaning on those hierarchs and no vial in this draw, so flipping that thing could do exactly what Zeke needs to get back into this game.
And Greg does have a deputy of detention here, which you kind of have to cast it targeting this thing, even though that's not why you brought it in. But if you don't do that, you're basically starting at 0,
Yep.
which you can't afford to do when a Storm deck is going to have 3 or 4 mana and a grip of cards.
Agreed.
Yep. Deputy, anywhere? Yep.
And hopefully remember Thalia's Lieutenant trigger here. Nope, Deputy's not a human, so.
4, 5, 8. Yeah, I got 5.
Coming in for 8, Zeke's going to drop to 5.
Yeah, this is going to be tough for Zeke to go off here. We have not seen any reducer creatures in Zeke's deck. I wonder if with all the other stuff that he was able to cram into this deck, if he's kind of foregoing those value reducers like Goblin Electromancer and Baral.
It seems like the cost reducers enable a traditional Storm to go off on turn 3 fairly easily without having to chain a ton of your rituals together. But maybe Zeke is opting to play Simian Spirit Guides plus the bigger cards and relying more on chaining rituals together to go off.
Yeah, Zeke has had plenty of time, honestly, on this draw to put something together, but the draw just has not cooperated that much. That said, we do have an Echo of Aeon sitting in the graveyard, so if Zeke can chain together a couple rituals, he can flash back that Echo of Aeons, but he doesn't have the Aria of Flame as he did last time, so the payoff is still absent.
Go to 4 mana floating, and I'll spend it on Empty the Warrants. I'll make 10 goblins.
Okay.
All right, well, we're going to get 10 goblins here.
When you have a Echo of Aeon sitting in the graveyard, that's not too bad. That will gum up the board for at least a couple of turns.
That is it.
Zeke with the unceremonious, that is it, to pass the turn.
2 cards.
Dead to a Mantis Rider.
Deputy, one of your goblins?
Oh boy.
That's pretty good here.
We got a Deputy on one of the Goblin tokens, which means it's going to do the Detention Sphere
Say goodbye to all of them.
effect, and swing in for the win.
Zeke will get to be on the play this round. It'll be interesting to me to see if Greg, being on the draw here, names something a little bit more proactive with his meddling mages, if he does have one. I think Anger and Lightning Bolt are defensible names. However, I think if Zeke has a good draw, his deck will generally be just as fast, if not faster, than Greg. So I was a bit surprised to see Greg not trying to actually disrupt Zeke's main game plan.
Yeah, I think it was a defensible decision to make, especially when Zeke was only on mountains. And if you see a Storm player keep their 7-card hand and then lead on 2 mountains, you might be assuming that they have some form of removal.
Totally fair. Yeah, that makes sense.
See a Kambal, which is a pretty great card in the matchup. And Storms has to cast a bunch of spells.
Some Damping Spheres as well. A Knight of Autumn.
Seems like Greg came prepared.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he looks to be in good shape. Some Thalias, yeah. It's almost like this human's deck was made to combat Storm.
Yeah, it is interesting when you have just generic sideboard cards for your deck that are like maybe not the best, but are good at doing a lot of things, and when you end up running into a matchup where all your cards that are like all right at doing the thing end up being pretty good, and you're able to just swap out all your cards that are bad for cards that are just upgrades. And that seems to be the case in Humans versus Storm, which is why when Humans got to be a tier 1 deck, Storm sort of got bumped out of the metagame there for a minute.
Sure, and the really nice thing about Humans is that you're never really lacking a clock. Like, all of your disruption is actually attached to damage. So whereas in some instances you can certainly over sideboard and end up without a clock against these combo decks, Humans doesn't have as big of a risk there because pretty much everything they're siding in is attached to damage.
I'll go first.
All right, Greg wisely choosing to be on the play. Looks like I see a Champion of the Parish maybe in the opening hand and some lands. Usually that's a keep. Can't see everything.
Throw some
It's
value.
like Greg with
Yep.
or Zeke with a mountain and island. Looked like a couple rituals there. Zeke's hand looked serviceable enough. He has mana of both colors and 7 cards. Storm is a bit of a critical mass deck, so sensible to keep hands that may not look amazing at first as long as you have cards, cantrips, and cards that can kind of work to get you the hand that you need to go off.
I haven't seen any of those real 2-for-1 value card draw spells out of Zeke's deck yet either. I mean, you have a potentially 7-for-1 card.
It's true. Yeah, Echo Valens maybe takes the place of a pieces of the puzzle in this case.
Okay, Greg with the turn 1 vial.
Looks like 2 Faithless Looting in hand for Zeke. Drops a Shivan Reef. Passes the turn.
Well, that was the Champion of the Parish picked up a little bit late there, I think, for Greg. But we're going to vial it in and get a freebooter. Hopefully
Nice.
trigger that champion.
And Greg has that very good combo of freebooter, and he also has Meddling Mage in hand, so he will be able to gather the information he needs now and then follow it up with the Meddling Mage. What would you name here, Travis?
Well, what would I take with the freebooter is the interesting
Yes.
question. It looks like there's 2 Faithless Looting, so probably taking one of those is off the table. Manamorphose can enable some pretty busted things, but then you have the Aria of Flame, which Zeke is not going to be able to cast unless Zeke draws a ritual the next turn, but is kind of an easy choice because that's a big engine of the deck.
So Aria of Flame is actually 3 mana, so he would be able to cast
Okay.
it this next turn. So I think taking the Aria is very, very defensible.
New cards. And we get a Faithless Looting for Zeke, drawing 2. And discarded a land and looting. Oh, there we go. 2 in a red. Seems like a good deal.
Yeah, seems like it should be more.
Thought it was 4, definitely not 4. So Greg doing a good job at drawing the 1-drops after he really wants to draw them. Saw Noble Hierarch picked up there.
Yeah, I really like Greg's position in this match. I think you know that Zeke has 2 looting stranded in hand. I think Meddling Mage.
A looting was cast and then 1 was
Oh,
discarded. So
excuse me.
we're at 0 lootings in hand that
Missed
we know
it.
of right now.
All right, fair enough.
But we have a mage cast.
I'll name Manamorphose.
And it's going to name Manamorphose, the known card that's in Zeke's hand. One of the stronger cards in the Storm deck, and also lots of other decks, like Izzet Phoenix, or Mono Red Phoenix. Just draw a card, up your Storm count, manipulate your mana.
And the second Meddling Mage comes down and names Faithless Looting. So Greg has gone kind of the more aggressive naming line this time, not naming to protect his creatures. Maybe has a bead that possibly Zeke is not playing too many defensive cards in the matchup. And we
Ooh.
see Grey Ogre.
Huh.
The old hard cast Simian Spirit Guide. Zeke is at, I'm sure, some low life total that we are not.
Activating Vial is a Mantis Rider.
Combat? Yep. 6, 7 for 10.
Coming in for 10.
I got a 5.
And Zeke going to 5.
Not as low as I thought.
Yeah.
And that's
Greg's
it.
gonna take this match.
And that's
Oh, a couple of
that's
Metamorphos left over in hand.
Echoing Truth.
kind of what you expect to see from humans in the matchup.
Choked on mana.
Uh,
I got a lot of the cards that I ended up
this deck, humans, is really, really good against the Storm deck.
Maybe it's not the correct one with the information I had, but
Yeah, it seems like your Meddling Mage calls are gonna be
some mana and then use my
interesting. It seemed like Greg was maybe reading some tells that Zeke had, and was being really defensive in the second game. But
and then also
yeah, made the definite right calls in that third game and took the match.
Yeah, I really like to see kind of the evolution of Greg's calls. It is a really cool with Meddling Mage. I think it's an extremely skill testing card to see kind of as people see cards from their opponent, it kind of changes and how their names tend to get more pinpoint as the match goes on.
I probably should, huh?
But it looks like we have about 20 minutes left here for this round, so I'm gonna pop out there and see what matches are left going and maybe bring you a game 3.